Olá, boa noite a todos e todas. Estamos aqui numa edição especial do Revelando Shakespeare para conversar com vocês, para fazer uma experiência nova, fazer uma espécie de happy hour para falar de Shakespeare e de vinho. E hoje a gente tem um convidado especialíssimo que já esteve aqui no Revelando 2 vezes, que é o Michael Dobson. E eu vou dar essa introdução em português só para avisar vocês que a gente vai ter esse vídeo legendado em breve. E vamos começar a falar em inglês. E a Tuna, nossa querida Tuna, vai fazer a apresentação. Então, todo mundo muito bem-vindos e comentem, coloquem aí comentários, me mandem depois fotos se vocês estão bebendo um vinho bem gostoso para a gente poder interagir e a gente posta lá no Revelando, tá bom? Boa noite a todos. Então, Tuna, com você.
Okay, so now, Michael Dobson, our dearest friend, our very special guest star, I need to translate what Valéria told everybody about you. Well, I'll try to change a few words, because otherwise you'll be too vain. You'll be so flattered. Anyway, we're very happy to have you back, Michael Dobson. Be welcome. Everybody's welcoming you, Janaína and David. So we are so thrilled to have you back. Let's drink some wine.
Maria is here too.
Anna Maria. Right.
Hi, Maria. We're so excited. So we'll be all drinking. And Michael, we will be adding the subtitles later,
Wonderful. I really look forward to finding out what I said.
So well, I love Euripides, and I love this Dionisiac evening. So let's drink,
absolutely.
Let's relax,
Indeed.
Let's talk. Here you're completely free, and so we'll be talking about everything and everyone and nothing, whatever. So you're welcome, my dear.
Thank
you
you.
are in our hearts, and as Nikki, and so here's to you.
And to you, Tuna. So this is the anticlimactic moment at which it turns out that I'm not going to speak fluent Portuguese at all. And you'll have to wait and read what I'm saying later on when somebody has translated and euphemized it and imposed some meaning on it. But since I am speaking English, I'm going to start with an English word that doesn't get used as often as it ought to. And that word is posset, because I don't think we should be pedantically confined to wine. There are lots of other kinds of alcohol in the world, and some of them are in Shakespeare. And one of them is posset. I have prepared before the program a genuine hot ale posset, which is currently just about setting in this bowl. I thought you can make a sack posset. You can even make a brandy posset if you really want to. But I mean, they're only Duncan's grooms. You don't want to waste the good stuff on them. This is the stuff that Lady Macbeth drugs so that she can render Duncan's bodyguards unconscious. And it's a marvelous, I think when you really taste and smell the stuff and get a feeling of its texture, you feel that scene much more powerfully, because a posset is basically an alcoholic children's drink. It's a hot bedtime drink. You drink it's egg beaten up in warm milk and then poured into hot alcohol to make it curdle, so that you get something that's sort of like warm milk and scrambled eggs, but with a bit of a kick to it, and some spice. So I'm now going to decant this posset, which is, as I say, an ale posset. It's made in hot beer. I'm going to pour it into this tankard very messily. Oh, if you've encountered the vomit of young children, you may find this texture fairly familiar. It's sort of got sort of congealed bits in it.
Cute.
I mean, it doesn't always come out quite like this, but I'm going to add ground ginger and a little cinnamon to go with. Spiced beer is quite a thing in the Tudor period. Hot beer with egg in it is quite a thing. Falstaff refuses to have egg in his beer in Merry Wives of Windsor, even after he's been dunked in the Thames. He says he doesn't want any pullet sperm in his brewage. But I have got pullet sperm in my brewage. Here is a nice, comforting, I hope not drugged, genuine ale posset. And
oh my God.
Amazing. We just got Michael giving us a recipe.
No,
A recipe.
wonderful.
And now we want to see the effects. Yes, drink more.
After 2
Yes,
hours.
You have to
drink more, Michael. Please drink it.
Well, bear in mind
Nice.
the difference in time zones. It's a long time since Nikki and I had dinner and quite a lot of wine. I'm liable to fall unconscious anyway, whatever's in the posset. The drugs would be superfluous. Anyway, it's a strangely soothing beginning to a symposium, a hot posset, as it should be really the last thing you drink, sort of nourishing and comforting. And I think it's so in keeping with the way that play works, with all that inverted nurture stuff, the witches cooking the horrible recipe, Lady Macbeth welcoming everybody but then having them killed. So the fact that she's giving a drugged sort of children's drink like Ovaltine or cocoa or something to enable, as it turns out, the grooms and Duncan to all get killed, it's very much in keeping with much of the mechanism of that play. If you can imagine a mixture between beer and custard, with spices and alcohol, that's sort of what I have here in this tankard.
Great. Thanks a lot for sharing.
So in Brazil we have quentão, which is also, it's wine and ginger and cinnamon, and we drink it hot in June, because in June we have all the solstice and the St. John festival. So we drink and we get drunk. It's not that we just drink. We need to get drunk so we can forget, we can forget reality. We can forget a lot of things. And
It's funny,
we jump over the fire. We have bonfires, so we drink and we jump over. It's very nice.
Yes.
Sounds wonderful.
Essa de São João, quentão.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's true that I've only been to Brazil once, and only for a very few days. But strangely, I do remember people drinking alcohol while I was in Brazil. I didn't see anybody jump over a fire, but clearly it was the wrong time of year. But there was definitely people who felt they should be drinking alcohol. I remember a continuous stream of caipirinhas much of the time I was there.
I know that, but this is in June. So Maria is sending a message. I hope no one has left Michael in charge of guarding the king of the artistic director of the Royal Shakespeare Company or anyone important this evening. Oh my God.
No, I
Michael,
think
please don't sign any documents today, okay? Please.
Janaína, say about
Eu acabei de falar do quentão, Jana.
Yeah.
A gente acabou de falar das fogueiras.
Michael should try our typical drink quentão, made of wine or cachaça and spices.
Yeah.
I look forward to it. I can't wait. Oh, it's Angelica too. It's great. Everyone's here. Yes, I mean, I'm interested that there's this warmed wine culture in Brazil, despite the heat, because as you'll remember, various characters in Shakespeare want their wine heated up. Sir Toby wants some burnt sack. Falstaff has burnt sack at different points. It's burnt just meaning mulled, heated, and it might well be spiced as well. I mean, it makes more sense to me in England, where it's cold and damp, than it does in Brazil, that one would actually want the wine above room temperature. But
Michael,
I wouldn't refuse it.
It's like Christmas. So Christmas is in December. It's summertime, but we imported some traditions, from Europe. So poor Santa Claus, and he, with the beard, he should wear, I don't know, a bathing suit or whatever. So in Brazil, we have imported some traditions from Europe. And I think this is why maybe in June we drink hot wine, because it's considered cold here in June and July.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, well, I'll look out for it. Put it on the list.
So we have to say saúde.
Cheers.
Well, cheers to you.
Cheers, Michael.
I quaff to you in posset for the time being.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh my God, this is dangerous.
Now, I think I should. Well, I've got some beer open, it's true, but I should probably move over onto something Shakespearean you probably can't see because this is a confined space and a narrow camera angle, but there is a considerable repertoire of stuff there. I admit, including a bottle of Tattinger champagne, not that Shakespeare mentions champagne because it hadn't been invented, but just so that we can collectively feel sorry for Shakespeare that champagne hadn't been invented. And incidentally, congratulate the boyfriend of one of my daughters who gave us this champagne for Christmas and thereby hugely improved his popularity with his girlfriend's parents. What I also have here, though, from a little further south, is some claret. And this, of course, wine from Bordeaux, hugely important wine producing area, and the bit that Henry VI was trying to hold on to unsuccessfully, as we hear the news of the English territorial losses in Western France during the course of the Henry VI plays. It's mentioned a lot in Shakespeare. The supply of claret was dropping off. It was quite expensive, but it's regarded as the good stuff, and it still is the good stuff. I mean, one of the exciting things about drinking wine, I think, is guessing what it tasted like then, because you can't compare two different wines, or you can't compare the same wine on different occasions. We know what modern wine tastes like, and we know what modern wine tastes like to us in the context of everything else we eat and drink. But what wine tasted like in the 16th century, even if we had a perfectly preserved sample of it, we wouldn't really know, because our palates wouldn't be adjusted in the same way or to the same amount of salt and sugar and fat and all the other things that people were drinking. We know they liked their wine to be bright, to look clear in color. They talk about this. Lime was used as an additive in wines to make it look better, even though it adulterated it and adjusted the flavor. But we also know that the Elizabethans liked their wine sweet. Sir John Falstaff is nicknamed Sir John's Sack and Sugar. And it's expected that he's going to have sugar. He's going to be paying for sugar to put in his wine. You see it in that tavern bill that Prince Henry takes out of his pocket. So I suspect if we'd ordered claret at the Boar's Head Tavern, it probably didn't taste much like this does, but they really liked it. And this is really good. This is a Lussac Saint-Emilion. So it's from down the Gironde, I'm going to open it now. I have prepared carefully before the program a sort of Falstaff-sized wine glass.
Oh, wow.
For the occasion. Wine glasses, a really fashionable and expensive novelty for the Elizabethans. It's amazing that Christopher Sly finds a pub where he is in Warwickshire in the Induction to Taming the Shrew, where there are glasses to be smashed. Sir John Falstaff says, well, your glass is your only drinking. It's a great status symbol. Oh yeah, let's drink out of glass all the time. Most people are drinking out of earthenware, drinking out of ceramic pots, drinking out of leather tankards, but glass. Christopher Sly gets into trouble for bursting glasses. He's got drunk and has smashed a lot of glassware, but I'm not planning to do that. I'm planning to preserve this.
Wow.
It's a very beautiful color. There we go. So claret is such a status symbol and such an object of desire that when Jack Cade has his rebellion in Henry VI Part 2, and he wins a victory and he gets to London Stone in London, he says that the pissing conduit shall run with claret wine this first year of our reign. He's making this completely false promise that the public drinking fountain, the public water supply, will just be replaced with wine for a whole year. It's this fake miracle, which of course doesn't happen, but it's a nice idea to have a public pump supplying claret instead of just water. Faintly blasphemous, but nonetheless, it's a policy that few of his supporters are going to argue with for very long. So here's some claret in honor of Jack Cade. And despite the fact, of course, that it's Lent, we should really be consuming all this alcohol a couple of weeks back on what for you ought to be Carnival, and what here in sad, damp Northwest Europe is Pancake Day. There is no tradition in this village of people processing around wearing spangly bikinis, doing the samba. We just stay at home and cook some pancakes, and if we're lucky, open some claret. So another toast, perhaps. Here's to all the great wine producers of Bordeaux in centuries of gratitude, whether or not we ever get it supplied at the state's expense. But let's go on hoping. Cheers.
Cheers, my dear.
Great introduction. Cheers to all.
Tuna, can you read?
I will read what Maria sent.
Yes.
On the other hand, if you have anything important to remember, it will come in handy. By Jupiter, forgot. I'm weary, yet my memory's tired. Have we no wine here?
I long to see Maria as Coriolanus. I think that would be a fabulous experience. Though as far as we know, Coriolanus never does remember, even after he's had the wine. But I think it's an interesting connection, the connection between wine and memory. And I think it's one of the reasons wine is important in Shakespeare and of course elsewhere in the culture. It turns out that the bit of the brain responsible for smell and taste is very close to the bit of the brain responsible for memory. Hence, Proust being, drinking insipid tea and eating a Madeleine and remembering all those boring French snobs that he then writes all those books about. But wine has the same effect. You drink wine and it immediately, it's transformative, it's transporting. You remember other times you've tasted a wine a bit like that. You suddenly remember very vividly other occasions when you've drunk. Mm.
And also, I was thinking about the Greeks, about of course the Bacchae and I mean, the birth of Greek tragedy, the birth of theater is connected to wine, is connected to freedom and not to have this self-censorship. Oh, I will not drink. No, I will drink. I will open the doors of perception, as William Blake would say. So I think wine could be a synonym of freedom, of being, relaxed, and wine also is connected to the poets. I mean, to Baudelaire, to Rimbaud, to Verlaine, more than absinthe. I think it's more wine. Right?
Yeah.
And also, I think wine is also used as an excuse. I mean, Michael, I was a little tipsy. I was a little bit drunk because I had too much wine. So I can say anything and I can say everything because, I drank some wine,
Yeah, absolutely. I think the connection between Dionysus and drama and alcohol is powerful and enduring, and long may it remain powerful and enduring. I mean, it reminds me of the way wine does and the way you do, because you are so close to Greek tragedy and could be there in a second if you wanted to be. I once was taken on a lecture tour of Greece by the British Council with two other professors, Peter Holland and Kiernan Ryan, and we were in Athens at the end of this tour, and we of course went to the Theatre of Dionysus and stood where the stage was and looked at it and reflected on all these incredible plays that this place had seen, and noticed that the street to the side of the theatre was labelled the Thespian Way. And if you just walked a few paces from where the stage had been, where all those great Sophocles tragedies had been performed, there was a place called the Thespis Taverna. And we just settled into the Thespis Taverna and drank and reminisced for hours. I mean, time stopped. I think I knew every piece of gossip that had happened in Cambridge University for about the previous 20 years by the end of that afternoon. And luckily, I can't remember very much of it. But, it was Greece that the owner of the taverna kept bringing us extra ouzo and extra sort of brandy on the house, long after we thought we'd finished. It was just idyllic. It's a genuine symposium, in the kind of Plato sense of a sort of semi-supine drinking party where you talk about lots of things. So unlike the symposium as it's generally understood in universities now. Yeah.
Great. And Michael, do we have in Shakespeare like some moments where the wine comes like a product that makes some connection of the mind and the body and the soul, and something that Falstaff would sign? And sometimes we have, like in Hamlet, that the wine comes as the symbol of death. The poison, and
or the symbol of misgovernment. Claudius is blamed very much for being living up to the stereotype of being a drunken Dane and drinking his draughts of Rhenish. Naughty Claudius drinking his draughts of Rhenish. I got some Rhenish here just in case, but for later, obviously. But German wine, probably red wine. I mean, nowadays most of the German wine that gets imported here, at any rate, is white and not very good. But some of it's excellent, but there's a lot of bad, cheap German white wine. And we barely see any German red wine in this country because the Germans have got the sense to keep it. I mean, there's actually some very good red wine up the Rhine. But to revert, yes, sometimes, as in a tragedy, generally, there'll be the dark side of wine, like the drugged, and of alcohol, like the drugged posset, like the poison cup, for Gertrude, which has provided such a wonderful opportunity for my old friend Imogen Stubbs to simulate becoming an alcoholic when she played Gertrude for Trevor Nunn when Ben Whishaw was Hamlet, so that when Claudius said, "Oh, Gertrude, do not drink," she just looked really offended and said, as if to say, "How dare you accuse me in public of being an alcoholic? I will drink," and then, of course, killed herself accidentally in that reading. But it's much more benign in other places and revealing of character. It can be a good test done on people in Shakespeare. I mean, the horrible sequence in Othello where Iago is stone cold sober and egging on Cassio to get drunk, feigning all that comradeship, singing the drinking songs about King Stephen, but actually, just pouring the stuff into Cassio in this calculating way, the very opposite of what he's pretending. It's a very striking piece of staging. And the barge scene in Antony and Cleopatra, where the triumvirs are there, Lepidus can't hold his drink, and starts asking people questions about crocodiles, like a sort of very inept tourist, and Antony gives him these answers, and he's just pretending he can understand and is nodding, and he's more or less carried out. Antony and Pompey are very comfortable and settle in for a very long night, as does Enobarbus. And Octavius just hates it and wants to leave the party as soon as he can. I mean, that's where one of the great drinking songs is in Shakespeare. "Come thou monarch of the vine, plumpy Bacchus with pink eyne," where there's a boy singing, there's drumming, it's all there's lots of communal dancing and stomping, and it's slightly erotic, but Augustus just doesn't want it. For Octavius, it just feels like losing control, and he doesn't want to let himself go. He doesn't want to be just one of the gang. He tries to pull himself up with dignity and sort of points at everybody and says, "Look, you're all drunk. We're all drunk, and even my tongue splits what it speaks." Wonderful bit of writing where it sounds as though he's drunk and trying to sound sober, and it's deliberately like a tongue twister that the actor has to sort of spit out. My tongue splits what it speaks, and sort of pulls himself up straight and goes off stage. He's very dislikable and very sober, and he is clearly going to win. And it's just the same antithesis that Falstaff points out in Henry IV/2, when he's seen the horrible, cold, calculating cynicism of Hal's brother, Prince John, in tricking the rebels into surrendering their arms. And that's the moment when Falstaff has that great speech about how if he had sons, he would addict them to sherris sack. It's these people who don't drink enough wholesome wine that are so cold and unpleasant and unmanly, and what you need is, and he gives that great sort of poem of a monologue about how wine mobilizes the body and elevates the spirits and energizes the heart. He's the best advert for Spanish wine ever scripted. And there is one vineyard in Xerxes, the region that is the origin of sherry, where there's a statue of Falstaff. Somebody out there had heard of Falstaff, had read that speech, and thought, well, if he's going to talk like that about dry Spanish wine, we should put a monument up to him, and they did. I've never been to it. I want to get in touch with him. I think they should be sending a supply of the stuff for educational purposes, obviously, to the Shakespeare Institute on a regular basis. But it's a statue I'm very keen to see. It's always interesting when there are statues of characters rather than just of Shakespeare. there used to be a statue of Falstaff outside the real-life Boar's Head Tavern, where all those drinking scenes are set in Henry IV. Unfortunately, the original pub isn't there anymore, and there's no statue of Falstaff in the street. They built a warehouse on the site. I mean, it's an incredibly expensive part of London now, Eastcheap. I mean, it was kind of sleazy and bohemian in Shakespeare's time, as well as mercantile. But obviously it's become the centre of the banking district now. But if you go to Eastcheap to this very day, you'll see there's a big Victorian building, and about 3 floors up, it's mock Gothic. It looks like a kind of pretend cathedral, but halfway up, a long way above street level, most people don't notice it, there's a carving of a boar's head, just to kind of acknowledge that this is the site of the Boar's Head Tavern. The pub on the site used to do a roaring trade in the 18th century of saying, come and get drunk with Falstaff, which you would. Any good novelty attraction to sell a pub.
Michael,
yes,
we have a 6 message here. Tuna will.
Okay. So, well, we've been talking about the truth. So there's also the connection of wine and truth as well. Freedom to speak whatever one desires in Vinho Veritas. This Heloísa Pesqueiros. Maria, dear Maria, great moment in Game of Thrones. Says he does not partake of wine, and Jamie Lannister replies, "You do understand how suspicious that is for ordinary people."
Yeah, no, they'd read their Shakespeare, that team. Those script writers know their way around. Yeah, exactly. It's horrible. Yes, and some of those lines.
We have Martri. Yeah. Tuna, can you read?
Jen Walkord, fab stuff, fabulous stuff. Dr. Morton points out that an intensive policy meeting takes place the morning after Antony's reveals an in their next scene. Handover acting very much required.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's partly taken from an incident elsewhere in Plutarch, which I'm always sorry Shakespeare didn't use. One of the things Plutarch's Life of Mark Antony says, which of course is the book Shakespeare's reading when he writes Julius Caesar and Antony and Cleopatra, is that Antony was so depraved. I mean, Plutarch really hates Antony, and he says Antony was so disreputable and undisciplined and generally a bad citizen that he was forever paying for the wedding receptions of actors. That he used to fund big wedding parties for actors. And once he came to the Senate the morning after one of these actors' weddings, so hungover that his friend had to hold out his toga for Mark Antony to be sick into it. You'd think there'd be dramatic potential in that. But yes, the idea of Antony, underperforming the next day or still being visibly hungover and not really caring, rather like, I don't know, Peter O'Toole or Oliver Reed, is something that's certainly there in that Antony Cleopatra sequence. Yeah.
Angelica has a message here. Você tá sem som, Tuna.
Sorry, Angelica.
Yeah.
Do you think how, when younger, before becoming king, would have been different as king after, without his adventures and alcohol night experiences?
Yeah. Well, Hal kind of starts with the alcohol and night experiences because Shakespeare's sense of that whole story really comes from the older play, The Famous Victories of Henry V, which has the scene in it in which Hal actually does punch the Lord Chief Justice in the face for stalking his servant, for punishing his servant. The sort of legend of Henry V being wild and drunk and disreputable when he was young, but then pulling himself together beating the French is something that Shakespeare inherits. It's sort of part of the trajectory of the story that's already there for him to use. Certainly Shakespeare moralizes it, or at least kind of provides us with one account of it in that speech of Falstaff's, where Falstaff, says real men drink lots of sack, being puritanical and just makes you ineffectual and unpleasant and calculating. I mean, actually, Hal's pretty calculating too. It's just he manages to do both at once. He manages to produce a convincing simulation of being one of the gang at the pub and drinking a lot and learning how to talk the slang that the pub servants use. But he's also just as shrewd at PR and manipulation as his nasty brother John is. So he gets sort of the best of both worlds without really enjoying either of them. I think that's the sad thing about Hal in the end. It's no fun being Henry V. The French princess is only marrying you because she's got absolutely no choice. And you're not allowed to have any friends because they would become dangerous favorites. So, Scroop and Masham and Gray, they all have to be executed in the first act, and you're on your own. Yeah. And we do see him talking positively about French wine in the last act of Henry V, as Burgundy does too, as well he might, being called Burgundy. The vine, the merry cheer of the heart, that great speech about the damage the war has done to France and how even the vineyards aren't being tended properly, which, of course, it's a nightmare for the world if the vineyards of France aren't being tended properly.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
It can't happen.
No.
Michael, allow me to ask you, I'd like you to choose 3 scenes. Okay, so one connected to love and wine, victory and wine, and defeat and wine, or delirious scenes, I don't know, but something that when we talk about wine and love, for instance, so you remember a particular scene that you really love, that you enjoy.
Well, I'm rather spoiled for choice. I like a lot of, there aren't many scenes in Shakespeare I actively dislike, though there are some I hesitate before going through again because they're so distressing. The comedies are paradoxically fairly sober. I mean, there are characters around the edges of the stories who drink a lot, like Toby Belch, who's not entirely charming, but we don't see Viola having a drink much. Rosalind is stuck out in the Forest of Arden, where there isn't a pub for miles, as far as we can tell, and the banished lords don't seem to have been able to bring any alcohol with them. So people tend to concentrate on the love at the expense of the wine to some extent. I suppose Petruchio calls for drink, but then, it's Petruchio, or Petruchio rather, as he should be pronounced. It's a slightly different thing. Wine and defeat, without question, the wonderful scene of Antony calling his sad captains to him and saying they're going to have this last great drinking bout until the wine comes through their scars. And they're all crying because he admits that this is probably the last great drinking party they're ever going to have. And he has to be reminded, cheer them up, and he says, oh yeah, sorry, no, we're going to win tomorrow. Really, we are. It's a lovely scene when he calls his sad captains. What would you have, Tuna? What do you think is a great scene of love and wine? I mean, don't they tend rather get in each other's way? As the porter says in Macbeth, it provokes the desire but takes away the performance.
Yes.
Oh my God, what a question.
This scene in Macbeth is wonderful. I love.
Yeah,
this is one of the best.
The Scottish play, they are provoking me. They're teasing me. I will not stay.
Okay.
What, the name of the play? Macbeth.
Mm.
Say
Yeah.
it, Tuna, one time, please.
I mean, I'm trying to remember any seduction scene. You know,
Yeah, it's something Shakespeare interestingly doesn't do much. I mean, there's the wonderful attempted seduction scene where Giacomo tries to persuade Imogen to sleep with him by making up stories about her absent husband, but he doesn't ply her with drink.
no.
That's not a move that we really see being made in Shakespeare much.
And once I read that Shakespeare said that wine could be a very good companion if you drink it wisely. What is it to drink wisely? Wine and wisdom.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe
Yes, well,
the wisdom is, in fact, that we can drink a lot and go inside of a
I think it's
word.
I mean, like, it's like Friar Lawrence saying love wisely, to Romeo and Juliet, as though these kids are really going to take that seriously or understand what he means. But I think it's interesting that when Shakespeare talks about drink and becoming drunk, he often talks about it as disguise. People being disguised by drink. Thank you, Maria. People and obviously disguise for Shakespeare is great. I mean, disguise is the very essence of the game. He's a playwright. I mean, people are in disguise to be doing these plays. Disguise is often what enables the plots. It's often what enables all the fun. So, it's at once, disguise, I see thou art a wickedness wherein the pregnant enemy does much, as Viola says, but actually she's, disguise is what the audience love, and Shakespeare's all about transformation. That's what makes his stuff so interesting, because his characters change themselves, they change each other, they don't just remain fixed types to make somebody else's point. So drink as an instrument of transformation, even if it's transformation into a incoherent wreck on the floor, may not be entirely a bad thing. I think Tuna's connection with Dionysus and being transported out of yourself by being possessed by the god. Thespis and Dionysus, they're hand in hand, and the pub's just around the corner. I'm very suspicious of any pub that doesn't have any theatre that doesn't have a bar. What would that be? Yeah, it was a traumatic experience, which I've never really got over, was working at one university in America, which had an enormous campus, and alcohol was forbidden everywhere on the campus, including at the theatre, including at the opera house. And I had the job once of escorting an Irish poet around the campus from one class to another. And everywhere we went, after every meeting with somebody, every meeting with the class, he would just say to me, "You're joking, aren't you? We can have a drink now, surely." No, there isn't any. We'd have to go sort of several miles that way. It just seemed so unnatural to him that there was this, temple of culture, this entire area devoted to culture and the arts, and no alcohol. It was strange. It had a lovely library, but I'm not sorry I don't work there anymore. My office in Stratford, my office window looks straight across the road into an Elizabethan pub. And that's what offices should be like.
Yeah, perfect definition. And prohibitions are always a kind of problem, because who is doing the control, who is prohibiting?
Probably Angelo. Yeah.
And Michael, I got one question just to try to go away. We have a very famous drink in Scotland and England, that is the whiskey. And the whiskey has more than thousands of years.
Yeah.
The Indians say they invented, the Irish, the Scottish. So I don't remember many whiskey in Shakespeare plays.
No, but
is there any reason or?
Well, Shakespeare uses the term aquavit.
Right.
Aquavit can mean pretty much anything with a very high percentage of alcohol in it. Anything that's spirit. So when the nurse in Romeo and Juliet calls for aquavit, when Sir Toby says, I worked with him like aquavitae with a midwife, that could be.
It's the name.
Yeah, aquavit or aquavitae. The water of life.
Nice.
That's any spirit, including whiskey. Shakespeare talks about mead. He mentions mead, which is, strong fermented honey, but obviously that's very expensive. Honey is a very desirable product. It's a great luxury to be able to ferment it. I don't suppose nearly as many of the Welsh ever managed to get hold of mead as you would think from the publicity. But whiskey, was certainly known to Shakespeare. As I say, it's sad to think that Shakespeare never drank champagne. I think we should all try and compensate on his behalf, as with coffee, and caipirinha. Shakespeare never got to drink Brazilian coffee, which leaves one even more awestruck. I think that he managed to make all those writing deadlines without any coffee. Subsisting on posset and sack and small beer, of course. Which everyone drank small beer. You had to.
Yeah, perfect.
There is a delicious quote by Rosalind. She says, "I pray you do not fall in love with me, for I'm falser than vows made in wine." I love it.
Yes.
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's delicious.
Yeah, lovely part. Leonardo Alfonso, I see, is anxious about Shakespeare's fatal drinking bout, which luckily there is no documentary evidence for. It's really a piece of subsequent folklore. It was rumored. It's one of those local stories written down by a vicar, sort of 2 generations after Shakespeare, where somebody claimed that Shakespeare had got very drunk and fallen asleep under a particular crabapple tree in Bidford, just outside Stratford. I think this is probably a fabrication of the Bidford Tourist Board. And it did for that crabapple tree because so many souvenir hunters came thinking that they could cut a piece from the very apple tree under which Shakespeare died after this drinking bout, that the apple tree long ago vanished. But nobody really believes the story anymore. Shakespeare's life's really quite dull, and people have had to fit it to certain patterns, one of which is, of course, sort of inspired, drunk, self-destructive genius. I think Shakespeare probably was inspired, but I don't think he was drunk and self-destructive. I don't think he was much interested in his own life. He was certainly, when back in Stratford, far too respectable to get drunk under an apple tree in Bidford or anywhere else. Though, of course, he did keep a pub. When he inherited the house in which he'd been born, all the latest archaeological checking and testing of the beams and so on proves that he did a makeover and converted it so that his aunt could live there and he could run it as a pub. So Shakespeare was a pub landlord. That was part of his kind of family property portfolio back in Stratford. So, he really knew what he was talking about when it came to those scenes in Henry IV. He must have known vintners, wine suppliers, all sorts of lines of supply for getting good alcohol into Stratford. And of course, brewing, we know he hoarded malt. Every sizable household did their own brewing of beer. And as I say, of small beer. In Elizabethan England, you really don't want to drink the water. You want to make sure there's some alcohol in it to disinfect it and take the taste away a bit.
Amazing. I guess we can try to translate this little
please.
to Michael.
Denise, the other drinks cannot be named as the blood of Christ.
Yeah. Yes, of course, there's a huge resonance. I mean, thank goodness for a religion that has made the cultivation of wine absolutely essential for its perpetuation, and that has contributed to, there is a going to the theatre is a kind of communion, which is why I think one of the reasons I think it's so important that all theatres should have a good bar, so that and ideally a decent restaurant as well. And can I recommend the Rooftop Restaurant in Stratford-upon-Avon, directly above the Royal Shakespeare Theatre? A fine wine list, fine locally sourced food. Anytime there isn't a pandemic on and you're hungry, come and eat at the Rooftop Restaurant in Stratford-upon-Avon and help maintain a great theatre company while feeding yourself at the same time. There's some. I'm very satisfied with the standard of catering at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and I even like the bar at the Swan, though it would be practically treasonous if I were not to mention a pub in Stratford called the Black Swan, which has become known as the Dirty Duck, which is the pub the RSC actually own and where all the actors go. And which is, I believe, legally required to serve alcohol to people connected to the theatre, regardless of licensing hours, because they have a kind of special dispensation, because there are so many late night shifts in changing sets and so on, and because they're actors.
Maybe we need a drink to go to our...
Yeah, absolutely.
Inside.
Yes. Yeah.
To meet for our souls,
To the reopening of the world's pubs.
Yeah, please. I miss them so much. The Brazilian.
Maria wrote something here. I think I didn't read it. So, Tuna and friends, if you have something. So, Tuna and friends, if you have something you need to hide from Michael, just put it in one casket and put a glass of wine from the casket.
Yeah. Thank you, Maria. Yes. I will add that to my feed.
You have the right to answer, Michael. Please, 1 minute for you.
So I think that we have to go to the end.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to say something about what do you want to say in this few moments. Because we are almost 1 hour here.
Good wine and good people make good company.
Yes.
Time flies.
Yeah. Well, just a minute. I'm just going to pour some sherry. In honor of, I mean, it's not the same as what the Elizabethans called sack, but it is sherry. It is made from the same grapes from those same vineyards. Sack wasn't. Yeah, look at that. And this is a very special glass, I should say. It's got twists in the stem. This was given to us as a wedding present, a whole set of them, by my favorite aunt who lives in a vineyard in France. And understands these things, but that's that's a medium dry Oloroso sherry, sweet. It's not unlike actually, and it's of course not completely unlike this, which is a rich Madeira, which is Malmsey, the stuff that the Duke of Clarence gets drowned in by the murderers in Richard III. But in any case, yes, cheers. Here's to alcohol, Shakespeare, and the revival of all that we hold dear, and the great live sharing of which alcohol is one symbol.
Yes.
God bless you.
Beautiful words.
There's a message by Ricardo Cardoso, our very dear friend, who happens to be our mutual friend. I mean, we became friends because Ricardo Cardoso introduced us. So he says, Michael, the best experience I had with wine and Shakespeare was at the Shakespeare Institute, with everybody listening, you singing at the last Christmas live party in 2018.
I'm more than happy to believe that.
The Spanish wine.
Very sweet of it. Yeah. The Spanish wine. Absolutely. Yes, I have to admit, when I first moved to my job at the Shakespeare Institute, I inspected the whole building, and I went down into the cellar, where I don't think my predecessor had ever been. And I realized the job might just turn out to be bearable when I found in the cellar a half case of champagne labeled research. I thought this is my idea of a research culture. We should keep this coming.
Great business to make some research.
Yeah. Cheers to all.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Long live Falstaff.
David said, "What a moment! Tavern feelings."
Online, we should open an online bar. Where people from all over the world could rent a table, an online table, and I guess we have an idea here, a new business.
Yeah, this could. Yeah, you can. You have little 3D avatars that would gradually sort of fall over the course of the evening. That'd be great.
Yeah, perfect. It would be very good. And listening to some maybe Shakespeare quotes and songs, Shakespeare songs. It would be lovely.
It's lovely drinking with you, even in 2D.
Amazing,
my
Michael.
dear.
We thank you so much for being here. I'm making my last comment. We thank you so much. You every time we spoken, you always being so kind and so generous with your knowledge and all your time to give to us. And it's absolutely amazing. And I thank you very much, especially for tonight, because we are having a kind of happy hour together. So
absolutely, a very happy hour indeed.
It was
It
was a very special opportunity.
So it was absolutely lovely to be here with you, and we hope that we can do more times.
Definitely.
Celebrate life. To celebrate Shakespeare, to celebrate the moments that we are here together. Thank you very much.
Valeria.
It is an evidence, we saw it's an evidence that wine can really bury all unkindness, as he said. Our Bard. Thank you so much, my dear friend, and regards to Nikki and the girls. David, thank you, Michael and Revelando Shakespeare, for this beautiful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David, for sharing it with us.
And all the audience, thank you so much, our dear friends. See you very soon, Michael.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I look forward to it.
Personally, we want to meet you in Stratford and making a documentary, a Brazilian documentary about Shakespeare, maybe.
Yeah.
Please.
Our trip to Shakespeare.
Count me in.
Michael, wait.
Janaina.
Don't
Lovely
go.
to see Janaina on screen too. Yeah.
Yes, Janaina
and Jen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jen. Yeah.
So he said, thanks. We're assuming that all the featured bottles will be finished in part 2.
Yeah, if they even last that long, Jen. Yeah, I'll bring some to Stratford. I'm coming up in a couple of weeks. Don't worry.
We have Chateau Lafite Lojac for you.
Bye, bye.
Night.
Bye, Michael. Love you, Valéria, Dani. Thank you, everybody.
Beijo. Voltamos no próximo Shakespeare and Wine. Em breve. Acompanhe a gente. Mande as suas fotos de você confraternizando conosco. Beijo e até mais.
Beijo, boa noite.